Hello to my WGU friends. I am making another video to talk about some common questions that I've been getting as kind of I have more comments being left on some of my videos. So I thought I would just address those and hopefully that'll help those who are studying or starting out at WGU. So stay tuned. Okay, so I have a few questions about what it was like to start out again because I have done a program in 2020, Masters of Curriculum and Instruction or Masters of Science in Curriculum and Instruction, and then just recently working on the Masters of Education in Learning and Technology. So people wanted to know a little bit about was the application process the same being a returning student? So it was the same in the sense that you need to apply, and I don't believe there was an application fee, and I think that goes for everyone. They always advertise this waived fee, so there was no application fee. However, I had to be paired with someone who was specifically hired to work with returning students. And so what they had to do is just make sure that I had completed my past program and everything was official, and that I didn't have the rest of my term still happening. So you have to kind of finish one term before you start another. So because I had finished it in 2020, there wasn't a concern there. And the process was very quick. Like there was not a lot of waiting around. It was pretty much instantaneous that I got accepted again. So there's a few questions about assessments. So the question that I have here is, do all courses have the same number of assessments? And definitely not. So, a couple of the courses that I've taken so far have only been one major assignment, one major paper essentially, and not even just a paper. It was like a paper that required some research. So I had to do some investigation in the classroom because I'm in the teacher's college, and then kind of report that in a paper. So there was a paper, but also like a task involved that I couldn't just write about instantaneously. I had to go do a task. But then there are other courses I've taken where I've had up to 4 tasks. So there was a course called Issues in Technology Integration, and there were 4 papers, and I found that to be a lot. The papers were not hardcore, intensive papers that were difficult. However, it does feel like it takes a lot more effort to get through those courses because you just kind of have to work through one assignment, then the next, then the next. So it feels like it's a little bit more time consuming, which it usually is. I did have another course that had 4 assignments, and it was to build a website. And so they were just basically breaking down the process of building a website into 4 different tasks. So for example, I had to take photographs and then build the structure of the website, and then I had to do the copywriting, and then I had to make a multimedia presentation. Then I had to launch it. So there were just different components. Now, most of the time there are, in my experience, a couple assessments if they're performance assessments. So at least 2, generally 3. Now, when it comes to objective assessments, usually there's just one. From my experience, I have heard of some courses that have 2. So, or 2 tasks, so an objective assessment and a performance assessment. So it really just varies. So what that indicates is that, it's really hard to know how long a course will take because each course is a little bit different. So another question here is, do all courses have the same level of challenge to the assessments? And definitely not. I would say as I'm doing some assignments, it makes me feel like there are totally different instructional designers creating the courses, because sometimes I do an assignment and it can take literally a couple hours to write the paper, and then I can do another course and it will take weeks, because it's not only that there's more work, but sometimes there's just a lot more detail that's involved, a lot more understanding the content. So it's hard to know exactly how hard courses are in a specific program, because even within a program, the challenge can vary. Now, it also depends on what you as an individual deem as challenging. For some students, challenging means just a lot of interconnected concepts, but for me, I enjoy that process. So for example, there was an assignment that had to do with integrating technology into the classroom, and I had to really think about the lesson plan and how it relates to the learning objectives, and then the learning objectives, how that aligns with the technology I aim to use, and how the technology could be evaluated, and then how the evaluation could be disseminated. Like, there's so many layers, and for me, I kind of like that. There are other papers that are just like super straightforward. It's like, what are the privacy issues within your educational context or your setting of teaching? And to me, that's quite straightforward, and so there's a simplicity to that. So then I guess another question that comes up, which is related, is like, how long do assessments take? So of course it depends, right? So it depends on your motivation to get it done. So for me, I have been pretty motivated to get things done because I don't really like to drag on assignments. So for example, I don't really want to start a paper today and then like pick it up in even a couple days. Like, to me, I just want to kind of maintain momentum. So I'll work on it today, I'll work on a bit tomorrow, and then maybe the next day. I can't imagine doing a paper over the course of like weeks. That just would drive me crazy. But even studying, like, I can't imagine like studying a bit today and then studying a bit in a week and then a bit. So it depends on how well you can sit down and study, and can you study kind of back-to-back days. But again, like I said, it also depends on the class. So some classes are just going to have more work, more challenge, more effort that's involved. And then I think another piece, how effectively you communicate with people in your support network. So for example, we know that instructors are part of your support network as well as your mentors. So I would say also how efficiently you communicate with them. So for example, like, if I know I have a challenge, I'm not going to say like, oh, maybe tomorrow, the next day, I'm going to contact my instructor. Generally, I'm going to book an appointment and try to get in with them in the next day while that challenge is in my mind and while I'm kind of trying to untangle that situation. And so for me, I've always had the luck of meeting with my instructor generally the next day. So I imagine if you have an instructor who's just booked up, that could be a challenge for completing the assessments quickly. I can also imagine that the quality of your instructor would make a difference in how fast. So if you do have a challenge, you're booking in with the instructor and they're not really getting to like the root of the issue, or they're not really giving you examples or demonstrations or walking you through the issue, then that could make it challenging. Well, there were a few times I emailed my instructor and I said, okay, I'm running into this issue. Can you help me figure out what the issue actually is, or where I'm not answering it properly? And they kind of just gave me a very general response. And in some cases, it almost feels like a canned response that they send to everybody. And to me, that doesn't really help. I need a very targeted response. So that's why I generally like to book appointments rather than email. There was one instructor I had that was really targeted in her feedback. So I booked the appointment for the next day. I had met with her and she'd read my whole paper. She knew exactly what was going wrong, what I was missing, and she had an idea of why the evaluators had marked that part of my paper as not competent. And so she was sharing her ideas around that, and then we did brainstorming together. So to me, that was a very high quality instructor that helped me through that process. I will say that they're definitely not all like that. So these different conditions or factors will influence how fast you can get through an assessment. So again, to recap, depends on you, depends on how hard the class is or how much work is involved, and depends on the efficiency you have with communicating with your instructor and the quality of that instructor. So I guess another question that came up is, are there due dates to complete your assignments? And I'm not exactly sure how to answer that because with WGU there is no specific due date because you're setting the dates, but your mentor will program into the interface into your degree plan some degree aims, some times that you should get things done by, but they can always be adjusted. But of course you have to complete at least 4 courses within the term. In the capstone project, you kind of have to work in things in steps. So it's not really a due date, but there's a sequential order. So for me, you have to complete task 1 in order to go to task 2. So it's not really a due date, but it's a progression that needs to happen in order to advance to the next, the next task. Another question that came up for me was, what is the hardest thing about writing WGU papers? For me, my experience is that they're not overly challenging tasks. However, there is so many instructions in the different tasks. And what I mean by that is usually there are like multiple components that need to be addressed in a paper. And you kind of have to really understand how to read instructions. So for example, I have on my screen, I can see there's some instructions here, and I'll just kind of read, I'll generalize it a bit, but read how this is showing up. So it's saying evaluate each of the 6 technology or software resources identified in part B of doing the following. And then it lists 3 different things that you have to do. And then within that, it has other specific conditions. So it can be a bit of a brain glitch as you're going through and you're like, wait, what are they asking me to do? And so if you don't answer it correctly, it's just not going to pass. So I find that sometimes the instructions are a little bit confusing, sometimes complicated unnecessarily, and therefore that's probably for me the hardest part. Anyways, those are the questions that I'm going to answer for now. I suppose you might be wanting an update of how things are going. I will create another video on that. Okay, I will see you in another video.